What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic, and I have a collection update for you. This one's going to be a little bit shorter just because, well, the stack kept piling up, so I just kind of cut it in half because otherwise it'd be doing like a really long collection update. But there's still a fair amount here, trust me. Got some reissues, some new releases, some stuff I missed from last year, as well as stuff from the Metalhead box. I had another one sent to me by another artist. Actually, he's popped up on here before. And I even got a surprise package from Headsplit. Didn't even expect that one, but it was a welcome addition to the pile because, I mean, it's Headsplit Records. Those guys just put out like quality stuff. So yeah, plenty of stuff in here. So let's just get down to it and start off with the least metal release I think I have in this batch with The Cult, Love. This is their second album. UK, like goth rockers, alts, metal. This band has always been really hard to classify, and I've been meaning to get like some of their earlier stuff. I have like, I guess, quasi more recent ones. I don't have any of their 80s stuff, we'll just put it like that. And I saw this one, I was like, you know what? This is a good place to start. This is kind of where the band took off. They had their first big singles on here with She Sells Sanctuary. I almost screwed that one up again. Rain is a pretty popular song on here, and I just like the sound of this band. It's kind of hard to classify. While it definitely has some like harder rocking moments, a lot of this with the very atmospheric guitars, because Duffy's guitars just have a very cool, like kind of chimey sound. They're very reverby. It reminds me a lot of Killing Joke, and I'm a huge Killing Joke fan, so that kind of like fit right in. You also have Ian Ashbury's giant-sized vocals. I mean, he just has a presence to his vocals across the board, and this album's just got like a lot of cool moody shifts on here. You get some giant-sized rockers like Big Neon, Hollow Man. Again, She Sells Sanctuary was a big hit on here. But you also have some more moody pieces that are a little bit more on the bluesy side, like Love and Brother Wolf. They kind of have like a more of a sultry sort of swing to them. And I just love the atmosphere and the sound of this album. Like, it's just a very big, lush sounding rock album. I honestly think like almost any song on this album could have been a single. Like, they all have a good hook to them. There's great melodies to them. To me, they're like a rock band that kind of just tried harder to kind of push their sound and, you know, make something a little bit different because, I mean, in comparison, I can't think of a lot of bands that sound like The Cult. There's definitely a lot of bands I would say have like pulled influences from them, but in terms of like a band sounding like this band around that time, it's kind of hard to draw comparisons. They really had like kind of a unique sound. Anyway, I dig this one, and yeah, doing the heavy bands that aren't necessarily metal, or are they? That's kind of like led me down some interesting avenues here recently, and I've been going back and checking out those bands that kind of, again, they had like a certain kind of heaviness to them, but they weren't necessarily metal bands. It's been a lot of fun, honestly. But yeah, if you've never jammed this one, strongly recommend it. Like, if you just like big sounding 80s rock with like a little bit more lush atmosphere and some kind of gothic post-punk vibes too, check it out. Solid album. All right, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce this band's name. It's Orcish for pain, which is kind of cool. Hrizg, maybe? Anyway, the album is called Damnatio Memoriae. I might have pronounced that one right. Anyway, this is the 5th album from this Spanish black metal act. First one in 6 years. I got into them with their album Anthems to Decrepitude, and I thought it was okay. It was just very raw, but pretty riffy black metal. It definitely had like some production issues, like when it comes down to the more raw sounding black metal. You know, I'm not like the biggest fan, you know, namely I just don't like the just really lo-fi production. Like, you know, I want the riffs to actually kind of come out. And, well, I mean, all right, this one definitely has a bit of that issue. But this one's like a little bit different. The guitars, I would say, are almost kind of sludgy. Like, they're a little bit more like deep and thick versus like the more like gainy, kind of tinny sounding guitars you hear in a lot of raw black metal. It's also a little bit more groove laden. Like, this just isn't a like static blast beat fest. You have some slower or at least like more dynamic songs where they kind of vary the tempo, like Once Fallen, Rebirth from the Abyss of Hate, and the last track, The Lonely Raven, which, I mean, with Raven in there and the way it sounds like, there's definitely like a little bit of immortal worship in there, I think. The opening track, Pilgrim God, actually has like some more Middle Eastern flourishes on it. And vocally, it's a little bit different too, because the vocals are in a more lower register. In fact, they kind of do some like different stuff, like the song As I Forgot Your Names. I think that's what that says. It's all in Old English. Anyway, I think that's what it is. There's some very just kind of like disturbing groans in that one to kind of add to the creepy atmosphere. But the main thing I really like on here, even despite the production, the riffs still come out, and this is like some solid riffy black metal overall. Like there's points on here where it kind of sounds like that transitional period with Enslaved, where they started pushing more towards that proggy material, kind of like Monumention. It has some moments kind of like that. There's just good hooks to them, and there's some really catchy melodies in here. The end of Upon Your Ashes, it's got just a great melodic hook at the end. It's still very sinister and dark, but it's just got like a cool earworm to it. Lots of double time sections. There's D beats, of course, blast beats. I like the fact that the tempo varies on here. It keeps the album interesting. It doesn't, again, kind of fall into like a static blast beat often. And the fact that there are just like good catchy riffs across the board, I think is awesome. You even got some songs that essentially kind of like complement one another in terms of like the track listing, where they kind of just go right into one another. The song When the Moon No Longer Shine, not shines, just shine. Anyway, that goes right into Upon Your Ashes, and honestly, you can't even really tell where the track break is. Like, it kind of works as like one giant song, but it doesn't hamper it all. In fact, I think it kind of works as one giant song really well. It's very epic sounding at times, especially The Lonely Raven. Again, big Immortal vibes on that one. In fact, I actually had to check. I wanted to make sure it wasn't just an Immortal cover. At least according to the archives and the liner notes in here, it is not an Immortal cover, but man, does it have that vibe. I dig this. Honestly, this is probably my favorite thing I've heard from this band. Granted, I think the production isn't the best. Like, again, it's just very muddy, and it kind of hampers it a bit just in terms of like, you kind of want all these big hooks and melodies to really ring out. Like if this just had like a layer of mud kind of scraped off of it and kind of, you know, like separate up the sound a little bit, I think this would be even better. But as it stands, it's a pretty solid listen. I dig pretty much every track in here. If you're big into, again, like that transitional period of Enslaved, Immortal, I would even say Horned Almighty, like there's some good punky kind of thrashy spots in here too. Check this out, it's a solid listen. Merrimack of Grace and Gravity. This is the 7th album from this French black metal act. I saw them in 2019 at Maryland Death Fest. I was a big fan of their album Omegaphilia. They put on a fantastic performance. I believe this was one that Jam and John missed because he decided to go out day drinking and ended up just crashing and then showing up quite a bit later in the day. He missed a bunch of cool bands, and I like to remind him of that. And this is one of the bands that he most definitely missed. And this is just really solid, I guess you could call it melodic black metal. Like, it definitely lays on melody quite a bit. Like, it erupts in just brilliant tremolos on the opening track. Dear God, why did you choose that font to put the tracks in? That's really hard to read. For the record, I also took my glasses off, you know, and I still can't really make out that. Like, that's just really difficult. But anyway, great melodies right away. Very similar to like Necrophobic, Dissection. It's melodic, but it's still very heavy and very riff oriented. There's parts in here where it kind of borders more on blackened death metal, kind of like Behemoth a bit. Lots of dissonant melodies everywhere. Like every riff on here definitely has like a big dissonant tag for the most part, and I like the fact that the songs are longer and they're very dynamic. There's lots of twists and turns throughout all of these songs. You have sections that'll completely drop out, become more quiet and muted, and then erupt into like just giant soaring riffs, catchy melodies. There's even some thrashy sections with machine gun guitars. Some of these songs even have like slow, more brooding sections, kind of, you know, like a bit of a doomy vibe. I love the build-up in tension in a lot of those spots because this band knows how to build into a crescendo. In fact, one of these songs that I just cannot read on here, it has like multiple sections where it feels like you've hit like crescendo after crescendo. Like it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And it feels like they could end at any one of those points, but I kind of like the fact that they keep going because each time they build back, it's even bigger. And I really like the vocals on here. The delivery is very dramatic. There are points in here where he kind of sounds like Attila from Mayhem, of those really long groans and gasps, but he also has a really solid, just kind of uniform growl to use. It's very intelligible too, and I really enjoy the mix on here. It still sounds raw and gritty, but it's well mixed and well balanced. The guitars have a great crunch to them. The drums are nice and punchy sounding. Like everything has room to breathe, and when it all comes together, it is just dense and heavy as hell. And I gotta say, all the songs really stand out. There isn't a lot of stuff where it feels like it's just retread of another song on the album. And the last track in here, no, still can't read it, is predominantly an instrumental, and it is absolutely amazing. Like, there's a couple of screams in there just for a little bit of atmosphere, but overall it's predominantly instrumental and it is absolutely fantastic. Now, there's still a lot I don't own by this band, but so far from what I heard, I think this is just a touch better than Omegaphilia. This is just really dynamic, riffy, just killer black metal. So needless to say, I dig this. If you are a big fan of, again, necrophobic, dissection, maybe a little bit of behemoth too, definitely check this out. I definitely need to check out more of this band because I only own this and Omegaphilia, and they have quite a few albums before this. So yeah, I'm gonna have to go hunting. But yeah, definitely check this one out for sure. Petrification, Sever, Sacred Light. This is the second album from this Portland-based death metal act. We actually missed reviewing this one. Again, these weeks have just been loaded with release after release, so inevitably we miss some. But luckily I do collection updates because I pretty much go through all the releases that come out and it's like, yeah, that one looks cool. If we have time, we'll cover it. If not, I'm going to jam it, and if I like it, I'm going to buy it, and well, here we are. Now, I missed out on this band's debut, which I'm probably going to go back and get now, but quite a few of you reminded me this came out in the comments for various videos, and yeah, I checked this out, instantly bought it. This is just great old school death metal. Tons of riffs, tons of groove. This sounds like it could have come out on Roadrunner Records in the 90s, like even down to the production. It kind of has that Scott Burns-ish sort of flair to it. I love the vocals. The vocals are just flat out old school death metal, somewhere between like, you know, David Vincent around like Covenant or like a band like Brutality. In fact, there's a lot of riffs in here, I would say, that kind of sound like Brutality too. Lots of sinister crawling harmonies across the board. Like, this has just got those killer, like, I don't know, like old school death hooks on it. And of course, some solid D beats on here. The opening track, Twisted Visions of Creation, and Sepulchral Lesions. Yeah, the song titles in here are great. Fun, punky, kind of obituary style D-beat driven songs with just great riffy breakdowns on it. Like, this is just, again, like one of those releases, it's like everything that I love about old school death metal. Like, it kind of takes me back and reminds me of like the bands that got me into the sound overall. It's definitely got its faster spots, but is for the most part more groove laden. While Sepulchral Lesions has like a really solid D-beat section, the bulk of it kind of gets into that nasty bolt thrower groove. And it even brings it down a step slower and kind of gets into like a death doom breakdown. And that is definitely carried over on Transmissions of the Unseen. That one is kind of just a flat out death doom song. Like, it's probably one of the slower ones. And there's some cool atmospheric synths in the background, like those classic kind of Fabio Frizzi, Fulci movie synths in the background. Like, you know, a lot of death metal bands use those, but with good reason, because they're effective. Like, they give you the creepy horror movie vibes, and that definitely fits with death metal. Honestly, like across the board, there isn't anything I don't like on here. This is almost on par with like the new Necrot in terms of just a classic old school death metal sound. It is a relatively tight runtime too. I want to say like it's just a scratch above 30 minutes if I remember right. Just a killer album front to back. If you're a big fan again of Brutality, Viogression, kind of similar to those guys too. Death, Morbid Angel, Bull Thrower, you know, a lot of the mainstays. Just check this out. This is just pure, awesome, old school 90s death metal that came out in 2024. I know there's like a ton of that right now, but seriously, when it's done like this well, it really stands out. So yeah, check this one out. All right, we're going to get into the surprise 2-album package that Headsplit sent me. Once again, thank you guys. You guys are awesome. So first off, they sent me a Hemorrhoid, raw materials of Decay. That's right. If you follow Headsplit Records, you can get a Hemorrhoid in the mail. It's amazing. Anyway, this is the debut album from this Portland, Oregon death grind act. Features members of Cemetery, Lust, and Torture Rack, and this thing is just absolutely furious and gross, and like this is like the kind of, I guess you could call it gore grind, but I mean there's a lot of death metal tremolos in there, and it definitely has some more groovy spots. It's not like full bore gore grind, but I mean if you own this album then you know some of the song titles. I mean it's very carcassy, but it feels like a little bit more gross, but also kind of fun too. Like ultimate commode of chaos and carnage. That's that one's just kind of fun. Moderate to severe plaque cirrhosis. We've probably heard that in a ton of Crest and Colgate commercials. Dante's Fecal Inferno. That's got to be like the 8th circle of hell. And of course, just ones that are fun to say, like Rancid Rectal Rupture. Yeah, there's more than just a bit of fun in these song titles, but when it comes down to the music itself, it is savage, riffy. The songs, of course, are just short but uglier than hell. The production, raw, visceral, like the bass sounds like it is kind of like just dripping sludge in the background with the guitars. You know, they're just absolutely disgusting sounding. But it's honestly pretty well mixed for what it is. Like the drums sound solid. It doesn't have like a needlessly plunky snare or anything like that. The vocals are great. You have a 2-part vocal dynamic there where it goes back between ghastly gurgles and rotten screams. Definitely a lot of nods to early Carcass, but that's always welcome in this stuff. It just has like a very old school death grind sound overall, and the fact that it will vary up tempos. Like there's some really good groovy sections on, let's see, Sliced and Tucked, Cacophony of Bloody Lactation, or Strawberry Milk, I guess. Sliced is a little bit more punky too, which is cool, and occasionally there's like a lead. I mean, it's mostly just dive bombs and noise, but I like the fact that there's a lot more than just, you know, blast and puke. Like, you know, generally when I see gore grind, like, all right, I'm sure this will be entertaining, but it's not always my thing. This is 100% my thing. Like, this kind of goes back to like Symphonies of Sickness. There's also a lot of comparisons I could probably make to like Repulsion or Terrorizer. This is just all things I love in my death grind, and yeah, this album's absolutely fantastic and gross and hilarious. That kind of checks off a lot of boxes for me. Yeah, if you love stuff like Exhumed, Coffin Dust, any myriad of like kind of carcass worshipping, gross fun, definitely check this out. This was an absolute banger. And the other one that they sent me was this one by Posthumous Regurgitation called The Coroner's Guide to Cadaveric Cuisine. Bit of a theme here with these two releases. Anyway, this is the first album from this Portland, but formerly California-based death grind act. Very much the vein of Carcass Worship, but these guys seem to really like General Surgery a lot, which is really cool. Like there's a General Surgery cover on here, and you look at the band pick, it kind of looks like any band pick of General Surgery. So it's kind of like Carcass Worship of a Carcass Worship band in a way. Either way, it is absolutely awesome as well. Starts off kind of slow and grimy, and then kind of builds up into frantic blast beats, death metal chugs, and just, you know, D beats, and just, this thing is almost like a missing General Surgery album. It's filthy from the rip. The first growl or scream you hear in it is very phlegmy, I would say. Like, it sounds like something else came up other than just that noise. A lot of comparisons to be made to like Exhumed and Impaled. There's some great riffs on here, and like production-wise, I think this one's like a little bit more, I want to say like clean sounding compared to Hemorrhoid. I don't know, it's gritty, but it's like, I don't know, more intelligible when it comes down to the riffs. Like there's some great tremolo hooks, especially on the song Tomophobia. I don't know what sort of phobia that is. T-O-M-O, phobia. Fear of people named Tom, maybe. There's a lot of irrational fears out there. I'm not going to completely rule that one out. Also, the song Nurgle's Rot is super catchy as well. Lots of fierce, down-picked grind riffs and just killer, chuggy death metal riffs all whirled up. Solid drum work across the board. I think all the playing is very tight. Like, it's not like a super loose sounding grindcore album. You get some more like brutal moments on Graver's Oath and the title track. It kind of like slows it down. It gives it a big, almost kind of brutal death metal, you know, sort of like breakdown vibe to it. But a lot of this is just fast and just grimy and covered in surgically removed innards, which is kind of how I like my death grind and gore grind. Like, I love the Carcass Worship stuff. Like, if a band gets compared to Carcass, there's a damn good chance that I'll love them, and this is yet another one to add to the list. And I really love the General Surgery cover of Grotesque Laceration of Mortified Flesh. They did a killer job in it, and yeah, this just kind of checks off all the boxes. So thank you, Headsplit, for sending me not one, but two filthy death grind albums that are just packed full of riffs and carcass worship, as well as some cool nods to other, just gross death grind and grindcore bands that I love. This is absolutely killer as well. Again, if you're a big fan of Carcass, Exhumed, Impaled, General Surgery, check this out. Absolute banger again. Gost Prophecy. This is the 8th, 10th album. I tried finding stuff on this band, and this is, a band that is omitted from the archives, even though it does have metal elements. It's predominantly more electronic. It's a one-man project. I'm not even sure where Gost is from, but I picked up their album Valediction in 2019. I enjoyed it for the most part. I thought it was like a really interesting mix of like kind of black metal and Depeche Mode. And they were very separate. Like the black metal moments were harsh and just vicious, very noisy sounding, huge electronic drums. Like it's kind of grating at times, but then it would shift over into like Depeche Mode territory and like, goth night industrial sort of stuff, like, Frontline Assembly and Front 242, Skinny Puppy, stuff like that. And that was the stuff that I really ended up liking. And I saw this was coming out and I decided to check it out to see where they kind of went from that one. And this is more of like a homogenized blend of all of that. But honestly, the industrial elements really kind of took over on here and I like it. I like it a lot. Like this reminds me of like going to goth nights at a club down in Bowling Green, Ohio in the 90s and pretty much sitting back and just getting drunk and listening to like KMFDM and Ministry and again, Skinny Puppy, Frontline Assembly, Laibach, all the pretty much staples of like just industrial. And this guy absolutely nails it. The production's fantastic. The music is very danceable, but also very sinister and dark. Like it totally captures that mood. Not a tremendous amount of vocals, honestly. And the metal elements, while they are present, it is definitely kind of dialed back in here. Like you get a couple of moments in here with guitars, or it could be synths that sound like guitars. It does add like a scraping metallic sound to it overall, but for the most part, like this is just very synth driven and just kind of dark. And I don't know, I just really dig this. Like this is kind of a throwback to like a other side of music that I really get into, but it does mix in a little bit of the metal in there. Obituary, the last part of that song, is particularly heavy. There's a really solid breakdown on Decadent Decay. Like it's very metallic sounding, and whenever the vocals do surface, they are generally more on the metal side. Like they're more screamed and agonized. Like there's some cleaner kind of like, more like sullen vocals every now and then, but for the most part, they are pretty damn harsh. Even the song Golgotha has like brief periods of blast beats, which I don't necessarily like the blast beats with the electronic drum sound. Like it can get to be like a bit loud, like someone slamming a screen door really fast. The songs that I really liked on here were predominantly more electronic though, like Through the Water. Obituary for the most part is just like sort of a just straight up industrial stomp. Deceiver's also a particularly good cut. Like it's just very catchy and melodic and dark. And I love all the layered synths. Like the synth work in here is absolutely fantastic. And I gotta say, like, I was kind of on the fence about Valediction. I thought it was a little bit uneven. Like one song would be one thing and one song would be another. This feels more put together and, it feels more uniform across the board. And while I do think it sacrificed a little bit of the more metal elements, I think this is just kind of flat out a better album. From track to track, I just feel like it's more cohesive and it really captures that old industrial sound really well and kind of modernizes it a little bit. Like there's definitely a lot of like modern synthwave stuff in here too. But yeah, this is a really solid album. I've jammed this one quite a bit and it definitely kind of takes me back a bit. If you're a big fan of, I would say Depeche Mode. Depeche Mode's definitely part of that, but Skinny Puppy, Frontline Assembly, and then, I guess like maybe a bit of Godflesh in there every now and then too. Check this out. I think this is a really solid album. Definitely not like the most metal release, but it's heavy in a different sense. We'll call it that. But yeah, check this out. Solid album. Zach Sabbath, Doomed Forever, Forever Doomed. This is essentially Zach Wild doing his parts 2 and 3 of his Black Sabbath run. First one, obviously, he did the first Black Sabbath album and did a great job. Admittedly, I'm not like the biggest fan of Zakk Wylde, namely his vocals. And I'm also not like a big fan of Black Label Society at all. But I heard that first one, was like, that's pretty damn good. Like, he did a solid job, and he kind of restrained the over-yarling, which was like a big complaint that I have about his vocals. And since I already know these albums, because it's Paranoid and Master of Reality, 2 of my favorite Black Sabbath albums, I was willing to actually just check this one out because, I mean, Zakk's a solid player. I don't have any complaints in his guitar work. He's absolutely fantastic. And I was just kind of curious to hear like what sort of like twists and spins he would kind of take on all this classic material. And for the most part, it's very on the nose and very traditional, albeit with like much, bigger, more modern production. Like, he's not going with a full bore fuzzy guitar. His guitars sound like Zakk Wylde's guitars, and they sound great. But he does take some like fun spins on songs. Like, honestly, Planet Caravan sounds closer to the Pantera cover. Like, there's more going on in the way of the percussion. There's busier guitars. There's a lot more to the lead work. And lead-wise, he's not just following along Iommi's lines. He's actually creating his own lines in there and kind of circling back to the main solos themselves. I'm also glad that Zakk didn't kind of overdo the squealies, because he is really known for that. He did add some to Into the Void, but they aren't like all the time, and it's just like, one particular accent, and it kind of works. It's kind of fun. And I do like the even more morose vibe of Solitude. Like, that song already sounded doomy and gloomy and just bleak as hell. Zakk actually made it sound even darker and more sinister. And yeah, across the board, he did a great job on this. The production's fantastic, his playing's fantastic, and legit, he does like his best job to sound like Ozzy, and for the most part, he does a really good job on here. You can tell that all these songs were played with a lot of love and reverence for the original material. I mean, it's early Black Sabbath. Like, I have nothing but love and reverence for that, early run of albums. Master Reality is still like the GOAT in my opinion in terms of like Black Sabbath. But yeah, Paranoid's right up there. And honestly, when he does the next batch, which I assume will be, Volume 4 and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, I'll probably get those too, because I think he's doing a really cool, like, just kind of fun thing here. So yeah, I mean, if you love Zakk Wylde and you love Black Sabbath, this should be a pretty easy sell for you guys. I really enjoyed this, and honestly, I'm not like the biggest fan of Black Label Society, but this is really solid, and it's not entirely just because it's songs I already know by a band I already love. Like, this is just really well executed. So yeah, check it out. All right, this next one is, once again, one sent to me by Puritan Opiate. It's a one-man project. I believe he is based out of the East Coast. Anyway, his name's Jason. I went over some stuff that he sent me. He even went through and burned the CDs, and once again, got me one here. And once again, sent me a cool letter too. Hey Nick, thanks again so much for the thorough and thoughtful review of those 3 Puritan Opiate CDs. Can't even express how much I appreciate it. Hey, not a problem, man. Here's the CD of my latest, Your Worry Shall Spiral Outward Forever. It's a pretty ominous title. Coincidentally, I finished mastering it the same day I first heard your review of my stuff. I think this one is the best of them all, to be honest. The songwriting and production alike are maybe a notch stronger, and I know you like doomy morose stuff, which is definitely what you'll get here. There are even some vocals. Please feel free to include it in a collection update. I'd love to hear what you think. But you also gave my last batch a ton of airtime, so I totally understand if you don't have time to do that with this one. At any rate, hope you enjoy, Jason. And, I mean, of course I have time in a collection update. And honestly, I think he is right in terms of this being a stronger output. First off, every song in here is different. In fact, all of the albums have been different. This is a project that really has no specific genre, and it isn't always entirely metal, though this one is definitely more in the metal spectrum, but again, like, every song in here is a little bit different. The first track on here, Thy Corrupt Nature, is honestly like very avant-garde. Like, it gave me some big Imperial Triumphant vibes. To be honest, it is my least favorite track in the album just because I'm not like the biggest Imperial Triumphant fan, and those, very twisted, atonal, weird guitar patterns and, all the stuff that is associated with that band, that sort of like jazziness, I'm still not like super hip to, though there are some things about that band I do like. That song in particular is just wall to wall kind of like crazy, atonal, like it's just strange sounding. But as the album goes on, you start getting a lot of like different tropes come up. Like again, all these songs are very different, have like different styles associated with them. I had to pause for a moment to take out the track list in here because I couldn't make it out. But as this album goes on, it gets way more adventurous and strange. Like there are parts in here that sound like surf rock or like scores from a David Lynch film. And he definitely did get into some doom with the track Fervor of the Sovereign Fool. That song is particularly gloomy and just, I don't know, like very morose sounding, as he said in there. And that one does feature some vocals in there that are particularly creepy. Like they're very distorted sounding, like kind of like crackle and hiss. And production-wise, this is definitely the best he's done so far, I would say. I really wasn't like a super big fan of the production on at least 2 of the albums he sent me. The synth one sounded really good, but when it came down to like the more death metal or blackened death metal one and the doom metal one, like it was a little bit more grainy. Like at times the drums kind of disappeared. This one, while I would say like each song kind of has like a different sort of mix to it, they sound a lot better. In fact, the drums come up in the mix a little bit more. The guitars have more heft to them. And in terms of what he has sent me so far, this one just has, again, a lot of cool dynamics from song to song. Like the last track, Arboreal Trespasses, has almost an industrial metal vibe to it. Like there's like that sort of like looped machinery sort of kind of vibe to it. Like there's like factory sounds in the background and like more of an electronic sort of element coupled with the guitars and such. But as that song goes on, it gets more like cosmic and spacey. He has told me in the past that he's a big Blood Incantation fan, and I definitely get those vibes towards the end of that song. Like it just gets more cosmic, but again, like, cosmic horror, I guess you could say, like, Alien or something like that. But, with riffs. Overall, like out of all of them, this is probably the best produced and I think most well-rounded, and he kind of showcases all of his like different influences on one album rather than the course of like different ones. While each of those have their own appeal and definitely lock onto one particular style a little bit more, I kind of like how this one is just kind of a little bit of everything. And the avant-garde elements, again, while I'm not like the biggest Imperial Triumphant fan, it is sort of a cool wrinkle to throw in there. And this gets really catchy at times too. So it's not all about just like atmosphere and sounding spooky and creepy and strange. There's actual like solid riffs on here and like really clever hooks. I also want to read a little bit of the liner notes here just because there's some interesting little twists. All music written by Jason Clements, except for a brief transitional passage on track 1, Thy Corrupt Nature, which is from Metallica's Jump in the Fire, but was, of course, written by Dave Mustaine. I didn't even detect that. Like, it's very cleverly placed in there. I've gone back a couple of times. I was like, man, I don't know if I quite hear it there. But since it's there, it's there. And the lyrics in here were adapted from John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress and John Milton's Paradise Lost. So yeah, I just thought that was kind of cool. Like, this is just a very, I don't know, like, again, hard to describe sort of album because it goes down a lot of different avenues, but it's really interesting, and the step up in production definitely helps. I really dig this. So yeah, once again, thank you, Jason, for sending me yet another album, and I hope you get a lot more listens courtesy of me going over this again. He thanked me last time because people actually went and checked out his music, and that's awesome. That's like the biggest goal I have with anything we do on this channel is to go check out the music, go support the artists. And it's just cool I got a chance to help a guy that's just kind of doing something that is, I don't know, like really different. But yeah, in terms of like comparisons, again, like there's doom metal, there's like kind of industrial metal, there's avant-garde metal, like bits of death metal. There's even Jump in the Fire on there somewhere. Either way, still I recommend you check it out. And again, links to all this music will be down in the description. So yeah, check it out. Deathwitch, The Ultimate Death. This is the third album from this Swedish blackened thrash metal act. This band has been defunct since, I believe, 2005. This one came out in 1998, and this is the 2024 reissue through the Metalhead box. Now, I had never heard of this band, which is awesome because I like when the Metalhead box sends me stuff that I've never heard of, and that is often the case. But looking this up, this actually features current and former members of Rune Magic, which that definitely ties in with the shirt they sent me in this one. And it also features Peter Palmdale of Dissection on here as well, and this is absolutely awesome black and thrash. Riffy, fast, aggressive. There's some parts in here that kind of border on death thrash too. A lot of stuff though I would compare to R Noir, which, I mean, that was probably my introduction to black and thrash years ago and still one of my favorite bands in terms of that entire genre. Tons of just killer riffs. It's very fast paced for the most part. Love the production. I mean, this might be a remaster, but it's mixed very well. The guitars have just a great crispy tone. The drums cut right through. Awesome vocals across the board. I love how much they like to alternate, between like just rabid thrash riffs and then like cold, icy tremolos, especially on songs like Violent Carnage, Death Machine absolutely whoops ass, and Prelude to Grand Conquest / Monumental Massacre. Those songs are flat out vicious, and it just shows that cool balance between their black metal side and their thrash metal side. But this, I think, overall just has like more of that thrash metal aggression across the board. Like every song in here just feels explosive. And there's just more of like a flat out aggressive nature to the album overall versus like that more like blackened, sinister vibe that you get in black metal. And even when they slow it down, they don't lose any momentum. The opening of Dark Rift, while it is more groove-laden, that triplet chug, that gallop, just keeps the energy at like a fever pitch. And minus the interludes that pop up on here, which, I mean, there are a couple, and they're like, I don't know if those were completely needed. Everything else in here has a very just flat-out, vicious, just explosive nature. I will say the last two tracks are kind of odd though, or at least in the way they're set up. Demon Sabbath is a short instrumental, and then the last track, Dawn of Yamatus Millennium, is essentially a very long outro track. I don't know, like that just feels kind of like an odd way to end the album. Like the instrumental itself sounds really good. Like it was like, yeah, this thing's kind of building up a little bit, and then it goes into the outro, which is just kind of like, a little long-winded atmospheric piece that's, again, longer than the instrumental. I just thought that was odd. But overall, I really dug this, and I want to hunt down the other albums. I think they have maybe 2 or 3 more. I'd have to look it up again, but I like what I heard here. This is just a flat-out fun album, and yeah, it was cool. They actually tied in the Metalhead box in a cool, clever way there with a band that had former members of the band that they put on the t-shirt. Either way, if you're a big fan of R Noir, like early Skeleton Witch, Necrophire, stuff like that, definitely check this out. Absolutely awesome listen. Rancid Cadaver, Mass of Gore / Flesh Monstrosity. This is a compilation of this Scottish death metal band's first 2 EPs, or demos. They might be EPs, I don't know. Either way, they're shorter offerings. Anyway, first time I had heard of this band, and Scotland doesn't have like the biggest death metal scene, so I was kind of curious as to, what Scotland was bringing forth as far as death metal, and this is just grimy, filthy, old school, swampy, dirty sounding death metal. Now the first 2 tracks here are from the Mass of Gore EP, and starts off with horror synths, and it's just kind of grimy sounding. The guitars come in, they are sludgy and gross sounding. The vocals honestly kind of sound a bit like Corpse Grinder, like it's a big, powerful roar. It doesn't really have like the vocals you think would match up with like very swampy, just kind of gross sounding death metal. Like you'd expect more like, cavernous growls, and no, but they really do work on here. It's more slow to mid-tempo too, so it's kind of closer to Death Doom. It definitely has that vibe, like there's big, heavy, droning riffs, but it has like a lot of like 90s death metal style production too, just in terms of the sound of it. It does pick up the pace a little bit on Mass of Gore. There's like a cool 2-step section in there for just a bit. But overall, like, yeah, it's just very sludgy and gross. But when you get to the Flesh Monstrosity side, like, kind of everything changes. First off, the production's way different. The guitars are way more crunchy. And honestly, a lot louder in the mix. In fact, the mix is just very different. Like, it's more, gritty sounding versus like kind of like that muddy, murky kind of like Death Doom sound. But I would still say that they're playing a more like Death Doom style of death metal. Like there's a lot more on the, harmonies and such, and the vocals are way more ghastly. And I believe it's the same vocalist. Like, I looked it up and I didn't see any other vocalist listed, so I'm going to assume it's the same guy. But yeah, this side, honestly, is probably my favorite side of it. I like the more, like, sludgy Death Doom sound that was on the first 2 tracks, but this one brings that Death Doom sound, and it also brings in some more up-tempo moments as well. Malignant Affliction and Dragged Beneath both are a little bit more up-tempo. You get some D beats, some faster sections, some more double-time drums. It's a little bit more dynamic, but there's also more tracks on that side. And I think Flesh Monstrosity is the first EP versus Massive Gore being the second one. I like elements of both. Like, if there was like a balance between the two, like, I prefer the vocals on Massive Gore. Like, I like that solid kind of Corpse Grinder-esque roar. But in terms of the production overall, while I like swampy, dingy sounding death metal, I like those big old crusty, just heavy guitars that are on Flesh Monstrosity. So, I don't know, like a little mix of both. But yeah, music-wise, these guys have killer riffs. They're well-constructed songs, and they are heavier than hell. And that definitely has me interested for anything that comes out in the future with these guys. If you're a big fan of like Autopsy, Cerebral Rot, Mortiferum, Coffin Rot, like lots of bands that love 90s death metal that play it now, I guess is probably the way to go about it. Like, it's just got a fierce old school vibe, and it's got riffs, and that's generally enough for me. So yeah, check this one out. Pretty solid offering. Zombi, Direct Inject. This is the 7th album from this space rock, synth rock, prog. I don't know what to call this band. It's a duo. One gentleman plays bass and synths, and the other one plays drums, and I have been a fan of this band since 2011's Escape Velocity. They just write amazing synth-driven, kind of proggy, atmospheric songs, and anytime they put out something, I'm generally pretty excited. We actually reviewed one of their EPs, and unfortunately, like, our fan base didn't seem to really even notice. Just sad because it was really good. But when I saw this band was coming out with a new album, I was really stoked, and this album is absolutely incredible. Like, tons of, like, just 80s synth rock vibes. Like, the opening track, the title track, instantly reminded me of Genesis circa Duke, and that's, like, probably my favorite Genesis album. I do tend to favor the Phil Collins era, but especially that early Phil Collins era. But I'd also say very comparable to like 80s Rush too. I love the drum work. This guy's drum work is absolutely fantastic. Very fluid, groovy, plays both in and out of the pocket. The synths are lush and warm, and the bass playing on here is absolutely incredible. These guys are both giant fans of like Tony Banks and John Carpenter, and it really shows in their work. Like, the songs are really interesting because you can go from something very chill and subdued and kind of like just a very warm ambient synth track to something that is decidedly more energetic and upbeat. And as much as I love all the cool analog sounding synths, I love it when they kind of drop out into drum and bass grooves, especially on So Mote It Be, Bodies in the Flotsam, and the Post-Atomic Horror. Those moments kind of feel like a little bit more rocking. Like, the rest of this, I know it's like a combination, again, of like an 80s sort of like synth rocker, and honestly, like, the score to like a ton of 80s movies. Like, this could score horror, sci-fi, maybe even action too. Honestly, they'd even have the score to possibly a more romantic scene with Sessuale, I don't know how to say that word, too. It's got like wind chimes, there's a saxophone, it's like sci-fi baby making music, like Sexy Time and Zero Gravity, and there still might be like an alien on board or something like that. I don't know. I'd probably watch that movie though. I don't know. I just love this band. Their sound is just flat out incredible. Totally not metal. I mean, the closest thing I could compare it to would be like Genghis Tron's last album, Dream Weapon. Definitely not as focused on the guitars. In fact, there are no guitars outside of the bass playing in here, which there's some like high register playing that kind of sounds guitar-ish, but that's really not the thing behind this. A lot of it is just about the grooves, the rhythms, the textures, and the atmosphere, and just cool bass and synth playing, and just amazing drum work. Honestly, that's all this band has ever needed to be interesting, and yeah, I absolutely love this album. I don't know if I like the last one, 2020, a bit more. That was just an absolutely fantastic listen if you guys haven't checked out that, but I don't know. I strongly recommend checking this one out, especially if you're a fan, again, of like 80s Rush, Tangerine Dream, John Carpenter's amazing movie scores, stuff like that. It's just an absolutely awesome, chill listen. And it can still be kind of like spooky and creepy at times. So, I mean, if you need that little edge there, you know, it's still there. Either way, check it out. Amazing album. Fires in the Distance, Air Not Meant for Us. This is the second album from this Connecticut-based melodic death doom act. Tons of hype around this one last year, and I never got around to listening to it. I know it was on Rin's year-end list, and he absolutely gushed about it. And yeah, I'm playing catch-up here, and everyone that said this was awesome, I would say was right. This is just absolutely beautiful music, period. Like lots of Peaceville 4 vibes, like definitely Paradise Lost, My Dying Bride, early Anathema, but also with like a little bit of dark tranquility in it. The riffs are both heavy, melodic, there's loads of atmosphere. The keyboards and synths and pianos on here add so much to it. Like there's just so much like just welling of emotion and melody that comes out in all these songs, and they're all like really good. Like this album is consistent across the board. I love the vocals. The songs are long but dynamic. Good balance of just like catchy, heavy riffs, but that sad, melancholic energy is just dripping forth on this album. Adrift Beneath the Listless Waves is probably a big standout for me. There's even some brighter melodies on there where you can kind of see like the sunshine cracking through all the gray clouds just before a wave of rain just comes by and reminds you that life is depressing and bleak and whatever else this album is communicating to me. I love it when they isolate the keyboards in particular. Like there's a lot of moments where they kind of drop out and then just play this just mopey melody, and how they build into it, the harmonies and such. It's just fantastic. And there's no clean vocals on here either. Like this is all very gruff, like heavy roars, which honestly I kind of prefer because it lets the music really kind of carry the melodies. Like the interplay between the keys and the guitars and the harmonies, I think are fantastic. I love the production too. The production is very warm sounding. There's a lot of like low end to it. It's very lush sounding at times and spacious. This album is just a flat out joy to listen to, despite it being just like unbearably sad. And I love that it comes right out of the gate with a big 10-minute opener. It's a really cool build up with the pianos in the beginning. You hear a crackling fire. Like it instantly just sets the mood, and it really just does not stop at all. Like a lot of this, you know, pretty slow to mid-tempo. There are some like, you know, faster gallops occasionally, but a lot of this is just like down in the dumps, miserable melodic death doom, and I think they absolutely nailed it. Like, you know, going over the last My Dying Bride, like this is definitely, I would say, on par with it. Maybe a little bit different just because there are no clean vocals, but honestly, they aren't really needed on here. Yeah, I should have got a chance to listen to this one last year. It might have ended up on my year-end list. And again, I don't know what I would have like removed from my list because I was pretty in love with all those albums. But yeah, I'm super glad I got this. I'm going to hunt down the first one as well just to see how it stacks up to this one. But yeah, if you're a big fan, again, particularly of like that more like Peaceville sound in terms of death doom, you got Paradise Lost, you know, Catatonia too, early Catatonia. I would even throw in a band like Deathwitch too, very similar to that band as well. Check this out. This is absolutely fantastic. And yeah, I got to go find that other one here at some point. So yeah, if you missed this one like I did, check it out now. It's amazing. And finally, we have Dead Chasm, Subliminus Ignatum Omni. This is the first full length from this Italian death metal act. Another one that I missed last year and I did want to review, but we just didn't have time because, again, there was like so many releases. I got in this band with their self-titled EP in 2022. This features current and former members of bands like Psychotomy, Funist, and Fuoco Fatuo, which is an amazing death doom / funeral doom band from Italy. But this is just flat out old school, grimy death metal. Very much in the vein of bands like Tomb Mold, or rather like early Tomb Mold, or Incantation. Drawn and quartered, I would say. Like lots of heavy, dark tremolos. It's dissonant, it's bleak. Goes from blast beats to death doom breakdowns. The vocals on here are fantastic too. Very low, cavernous roars. It's the frontwoman from Psychotomy, and she does an excellent job on, well, both this and Psychotomy. Psychotomy is a little bit closer to like Immolation, I would say, like way more dissonant and atmospheric. This is more dingy and cavernous sounding. But this band does a great job balancing out like the more aggressive moments to the more death doom moments, especially on Impious Embrace and Innumerable Dimensions. Both of those songs, you have, you know, vicious blast beat sections with like, you know, kind of that apocalyptic riffing style of incantation, and then breaking it down to slow, like single chug death doom harmonies. Again, kind of like incantation. The breakdown on ethereal fragments in particular is just absolutely devastating. Now, I really enjoy this. I mean, this is just kind of like right up my alley. It sounds like incantation. I have tons of bands that I listen to that sound like incantation. But I will say that this album doesn't necessarily distinguish itself very much from the pack. Like, yeah, it's got great riffs, great breakdowns. The atmosphere is murky and evil sounding, but only like a few of the songs really jumped out at me. Like the rest of them, while they're good, they don't really stand out very much. And I will say the production here, while it is pretty clear for the style, it does feel a bit muffled, like you really have to turn it up to kind of like hear everything. It's also a pretty short album. Like I want to say it's only about 10 minutes longer than the EP, and the EP was pretty short. But I mean, overall, it's just solid old school death metal. Like if you were just looking for something, again, that sounds like incantation and, you know, tomb mold, mortiferum, like witch vomit, stuff that just, you know, relies on nasty riffs and just dingy, gross atmosphere and sounds like it was recorded in the 90s even though it wasn't, then you'll probably enjoy this. I think this is a solid album. It just, you know, it's kind of a solid album amongst a lot of solid albums. Still, I recommend checking it out though. Again, big incantation vibes. If you're an incantation fan, you will definitely find a lot you dig in here, and I would definitely check out more by this band in the future for sure. So yeah, check this one out. Check out the EP too. They're both really good. And yeah, that is it for this one, which, yeah, this does feel really short because I haven't been sitting here that long, or at least that long in comparison to other videos for damn sure. Either way, I already have another stack kind of just sitting there. I just haven't got to it. So next one's on deck, and that's going to have some more interesting stuff as well as more stuff sent to me from fans. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel, up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls of Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old t-shirts are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats too, so if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below. And of course, thank you guys so much for all of your support over the years. It has been absolutely amazing doing this. It continues to be a lot of fun, and that is large in part to you guys. We got a lot of stuff planned for you. The Meshuggah ranking will admittedly take a little bit longer because we're going to wait till we get back from MDF, and I know Miller is going to be gone on a vacation around that time too, so we'll get around to that one. But, you know, pretty much all we got to do is just jot down our notes, because, I mean, I've listened to those albums a dozen times. But, of course, there'll be other content as well. I'm still doing more of the heavy but not metal thing, because those have been a lot of fun. More states of metal. And, of course, a ton of reviews, because this year seems to be just as active in terms of, like, killer releases as last year. So we're off to a really good start. Either way, thank you guys so much for everything, and we'll catch you later.